Hello Knights and welcome back. We are starting up our videos again. I know it's been a while, but we are going to jump right into our new lesson. Today's lesson is about things called line plots. So we talked about bar graphs. Today we are talking about something that's kind of similar, but it'll look a little bit different, but it's used for similar things. So key point number one, a line plot shows the frequency of data on a number line. And remember, frequency just means like how much something is happening. Is it happening a bunch? Is it happening a little bit? How often is something happening? So in our definition, the formal one, the number of times something happens. So there are three key ideas whenever we're working with line plots. The first is always to read the titles, labels, and keys. So that means like on this example here, my title would be phone calls made per day. I want to make sure I'm paying attention to what it's talking about. The second thing, write out each value and how many times it occurs. The first example we're going to do, this doesn't apply to because we're actually going to make one, but I'll show you what that means later on in the lesson. And then the last one is use the list of numbers to answer the questions that follow. So a lot of times they'll use questions that are about the graph, but not about just the graph itself. So our first example, Alice asked her friends how many phone calls they make each day. The responses that she got were 5, 6, 8, 7, blah, 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 all these numbers. So she's just saying she asked a bunch of different people, and these are the numbers that they said that they called. So like the first person she asked said, I make 5 phone calls. The second person said, I make 6 phone calls. The last person she asked said, I make 9 phone calls. So we're going to use this data, and we're going to plot them on the line plot. The way that this works, we're first just going to notice we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These are the numbers. In order to graph them on this plot, we're going to put little x's. So our first number is 5. That means where I see the number 5, I'm going to draw an x. I'm going to cross it out. My next number is a 6, so I put an x on the 6. Then I see an 8. Then I see a 7. Then I see actually another 7. Then I see another 8. Then I see another 8. Then I see another 8. I see another 7. I see a 0. I see a 1. I see another 8. I see another 7. And then I see a 9. Okay, so all I did was basically each time I saw a number, I wrote an X above that number to represent a person who gave her that answer. So our follow-up question, where's a cluster of data? A cluster, if you don't know, it's like a big group. So where are the big groups of data? When I look at letter A, this says the cluster is at 0 to 1. When I look at 0 and 1, how many x's are here? There's just 2. I wouldn't really call this a group because a cluster is like the biggest group. So for this one, it doesn't really work. Then we've got 2 to 4. When I look from 2 to 4, I actually don't have anything here. So for 2 to 4, that one doesn't work. 7 to 8. When I look at 7 to 8, that's these here. That's where the majority of the x's are. So this one looks like it's good, but I'm going to double check just in case. 9 to 10, there's actually only one x there, so the one that makes the most sense would be C. So all we did was create the graph, and then a cluster just means where's the biggest group on the graph. Okay, now we're going to do an example where they give us the graph, and we have to interpret it, or basically answer some questions based on what the graph shows us. Before I do any of that, first thing I do is I go and I read the title. Okay, this is showing me the number of books read over summer break. So just like it's set up here, for the first thing, we always read out the titles. All right, read out the titles, done that. Next thing, write out each of the values and how many times it occurs. So what that means, on this graph, I'm going to draw at the top. How many x's do I see over 1? I only count 1, so I'm going to write 1. How many over 2? 2. How many are over 3? 3. How many over 5? 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, how many are over 4? That's 5. Over 5, I count 1, 2, 3, 4 x's. Over 6, I count 2. 7 is 0, 8 is 0. Over 9, I see there are 3. And over 10, there are 2. I do this at the beginning just so that if it asks questions about it, I don't have to go back and keep counting them over and over again. It seems like it may be more work now, but it actually is going to save you time, and so that you don't have to count them again. So which of the following is not true? We're looking for the one that's not correct. A says half of the students read 4 books or less. So 4 books or less. When we look at 4 or less, that is these 4 numbers here. In total, that means 5 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 gives me 11. I have to decide, is that half of all of the books? Well, if these numbers made 11, I also need to add on to 11 these 2 numbers and these 2 numbers, because I need the total number of x's that are there. If you don't feel like adding all of those, you can also do the little bit longer way and just count all the individual x's. I'm going to add them up because I think that's easier and it's less likely for me to mess up. So 11 plus 4 would make 15. Oh my goodness. You can tell I'm a little bit rusty on my drawing. 11 plus 4 is 15, plus 2 makes 17, plus 3 makes 20, plus 2 makes 22. So this is saying half of the students read 4 or less. Half of them read 4 or less of them were 11, and the total was 22. So this is asking me basically, is 11 half of 22? Which hopefully we can see, if you divide 22 by 2, that would give us 11. So for this one, it's true, which means it's wrong. I may be doing some erasing just because I may need some more room to write on here, but there's all my work to show me that it's 22 total. So question B, or letter B, says 5 students read more than 6 books. So when I'm looking at more than 6 would have been all of these numbers. When I add them up, 3 plus 2 gives me 5, so this one is true. Meaning we would not choose B, because it is true. For the next one, 6 students read less than 3 books. Less than 3 means I'm just going to look at 1 and 2. I don't include 3 because 3 is not less than 3, 3 is equal to 3. So when I do 1 plus 2 gives me 3. But this question says 6. So this one is actually false because it's not 6, it should be 3. And then the last one, the same number of students read 2 or 3 books as read 9 or 10. So, oopsies. Oh my goodness. What are you doing? So basically, I want to look at 2 and 3, 2 or 3, which are these 2 numbers, or 9 and 10, which are these 2 numbers. 2 plus 3 is 5, 2 plus 3 is 5, so this one is true, which means we should go with C, because it's the one that's wrong. Now, we have a habit sometimes of just seeing these multiple choice questions and circling some kind of answer. But notice, as I worked through this problem, I actually had a lot of work. I had a lot of stuff that I wrote down. I have a lot of things that I'm annotating, like these things here, the little circles that I'm doing, okay? It's really important that you're not just taking the easy way out and circling a letter, because a lot of times we end up getting ourselves confused, and we want to make sure that we are taking our time and selecting the right answers. So if your paper just has things that are circled with no evidence of your work, then we're going to have a problem because it doesn't tell me that you're putting in your best effort. All right, this next question, I actually want to have you try it yourself, but before you do that, I just want to point out what this thing here says. This says X equals 5 students. So when you're working through this one, you shouldn't see this as 2 X's. You should see this as 2 X's that are each 5. So what this actually means is these 2 things are both 5, which means that the total that they make is 10. All of these are also 5, which means the total amount is not 3, but 15. Okay? So I want you to finish writing the numbers above the top, and then I want you to read the problem and tell me which one of these tables makes the most sense based on what you've got there. Whenever you're ready to check the answer, go ahead and unpause the video. All right, hopefully you have completed this problem and checked to see which one makes the most sense. I'm going to continue writing these. There are 5 x's here. 5 times 5 means that this one is 25. This one should be 20. This one should be 25. This one is 6 x's, which means it's 30. And this is also 25. So for 10, we should see that this is wrong because it's not 2, it should be 10. So A, automatically wrong. On this one here, 10 is actually not even inside of the box, which means it's not necessarily wrong, it just doesn't have the data that I'm looking at. Instead, I'm going to look at 20. For 20, it should have been 15. Is this one correct for 20 and 15? No, this one says 20 is 10, so this one doesn't work. Here, this one says 10 is 10, good. 20 is 15, good. 30 is 25, good. 40 is 20, good. 50 is 25, also what I got. 60 is 25. Whoops. That's a typo, my B. That should say 30. And 70 should say 25. So, sorry if you got confused. I will make sure I fix that for the future so that you guys have a mistake that other people can learn from. All right, there's one more question here. I'm going to have you do this one on your own right now. Then I'll go over it in the video. After that, you're going to do the last 2 questions without me. But for now, go ahead and pause the video, annotate, work through this problem, and then whenever you're ready to check your answer, unpause the video. All right, next question. Using the line plot below, which of the following measures of data summary yields the least value? Each x is worth 2 days. So notice, this says x is worth 2. So for this one, this is not just 2. Each of these is 2. So the total should be 4, 4. X and x makes 4. There's 2, 2, 2, 2, which means this one's 8. And this one is 6. So which one of the following is not true? There is a cluster of data around 14 to 15. Remember that word cluster means a big group. So when I look at 14 and 15, is this where the biggest group of all of the data is? I would say that's probably true. For question B, there were only 5 students in detention for 2 days. So notice this says number of students in detention. So the number of students who were in detention for 2 days. When I look here, for 5, it was not 2, it was 4. So this one is false. For C, there were 8 days that 14 students were assigned detention. So when we look at 14, there were how many students? 8. That one's true. There were 18 days that more than 10 students were in detention. So more than 10 means all of the numbers that are more than 10. When I take these and I add, 4 plus 8 plus 6, that gives me 18. So this one is also true, which means we should have selected B. So your job for the rest of the evening is to take this question here and this question here. Draw. Your job is to go through, answer these 2 questions on your own, because we will come back to class tomorrow and check these as part of your homework. So again, if you come to school tomorrow and all you've got is one of these things circled with 0 work here, we're going to have an issue. It will be a demerit There should be things written, and there should be evidence that you've been doing your work. If you just circle an answer, no good. So make sure you take your time, read them carefully, and whenever you come in tomorrow, have your homework ready for us to check, and we will see you then.